Hi, I'm Wayne Allen Root for Personal Liberty. I've had quite a personal news story in the headlines for the past few days, and I'd like to share it with you, my friends at Personal Liberty. The IRS scandal just won't go away. Kind of like Watergate, just hangs around and hangs around. The media knew about Watergate for months. They wrote about it, it simmered, it boiled, turned into nothing, and then all of a sudden, it turned into everything. It turned into a bigger-than-life scandal that destroyed Nixon's presidency. Could that be a repeat of how the Obama IRS scandal is playing out? Up until now, no one's been able to physically tie the IRS scandal to the Obama White House or the Democratic Party. That just changed. Up until now, no one's been able to prove they were targeted personally by the IRS for their political views. And that just changed, which means I have the proof that makes this a widespread political and criminal conspiracy. The revelations I'm about to unveil make all the other alleged IRS attacks look like child's play. An IRS scandal involving nameless, faceless Tea Parties or billionaire super PACs run by Karl Rove or generic theoretical taxpayers is not the stuff that brings down a presidency. But the story you're about to hear is Obama's Watergate. I have the smoking gun. I was targeted and persecuted by the IRS in an over-the-top attack coordinated at the highest levels of government and the Democratic Party. I can now prove it with facts direct from my IRS files obtained under the Freedom of Information Act by Judicial Watch. Thank you, Judicial Watch, by the way. As you'll see, my own IRS tax files not only implicate the IRS, but a leading and specific Democratic U.S. Senator in a criminal conspiracy to silence a critic of the president. But don't take my word for it. Let's start with a quote by Tom Fitton, president of Judicial Watch. Here's the quote. The Obama IRS obstructed the release of Wayne Root's tax documents. The abuse of process Judicial Watch and Wayne suffered through to get these documents is scandalous. Now we know why the Obama IRS was hesitant to give Wayne his own IRS files. These documents show the Obama IRS scandal was more than just suppressing the Tea Party. It was also about auditing critics of President Obama. Richard Nixon had to resign from office for less. The first order of business for Attorney General Loretta Lynch should be to appoint a special counsel who can convene a grand jury to look into the Obama IRS outrages. Those are the words of Tom Fitton of Judicial Watch, the government watchdog. My IRS attack was a political conspiracy coordinated by leading Democrats to either destroy me, bankrupt me, or silence me. Newsflash, you failed. Now I'm going to expose this criminal conspiracy. My case and my personal IRS files have been handed to investigators from the United States Senate Committee looking into the IRS scandal. It's time for the media and Democratic allies of the president to stop making excuses. My case is at the core of the principles America was built on. A president, by law, can't use the IRS to try to silence his critics or political opponents. U.S. senators, by law, cannot be involved in the IRS tax audits of individual taxpayers. The IRS, by law, cannot base tax audits on politics. If any of those things happen, it's called a political witch hunt, and crimes have been committed. People go to prison. But until now, no one could prove the IRS was using politics as a basis for vicious vendettas against critics of the president. That just changed. I can't wait to testify in front of the United States Senate about what we found. Are you listening, Senate investigators? First, it starts out with an over-the-top nature of my IRS attack. I was audited starting in 2011. The audit started with something the IRS spokesman and a government official from the Office of the Treasury Inspector General for Tax Administration claim doesn't ever happen. These two government officials claimed in a recent Wall Street Journal article, no taxpayer will ever get a call from the IRS. They said if someone claiming to be from the IRS ever calls, hang up because it's a scam. The IRS spokesman said the IRS never contacts a taxpayer by phone, only in the mail. Really? Want to take a bet on that one? Will that top IRS official be willing to take a lie detector test regarding that statement? You see, my IRS attack began with a phone call. The IRS agent from the Las Vegas office left a message on my voicemail. Then he called again. Then he took another unheard of step. He called my accountant. My CPA took power of attorney. From that moment on, the IRS agent was forbidden to ever contact me again. What did he do? The IRS agent turned around and called me again minutes later. And he spent 15 minutes on the phone lecturing me about my political views. He knew everything about my politics in detail. Intimidating? You bet. I felt like I needed a shower. I felt like I was being stalked. So now let me play prosecutor with these IRS spokesmen and government officials. Are you sticking to your story that the IRS never calls taxpayers? Or is the correct wording, the IRS never calls taxpayers unless they're high-profile conservative critics of the president in the national media? I think that phrasing sounds more accurate. After I won in tax court in 2012, something even more shocking happened, something no tax expert or attorney had ever heard of. I was hit with a new IRS audit only 5 days later. Yes, I said 5 days after winning in tax court, I was targeted again. To my attorney's knowledge, this has never happened before in the annals of tax history. After winning my audit once again, Judicial Watch took my case. They believed it was a classic criminal case of political intimidation using the IRS to target, prosecute, and silence critics of the president. They requested my tax files from the IRS under the Freedom of Information Act. By law, the IRS had 30 days to comply. The IRS stalled and refused for 14 months. Why would the IRS choose to disobey the law to prevent my files from getting into the hands of Judicial Watch? Well, Judicial Watch was relentless. The IRS finally handed over my files. Glory, hallelujah. 13 months late. 13 months of disobeying the law of the United States. The question is why? What did the IRS have to hide? Now come the really criminal revelations. Wouldn't President Obama claim the IRS is not political? That IRS audits are never conducted based on politics? That politics and the IRS cannot merge in a free and fair democratic society? That Wayne Root's case had nothing to do with politics, it was just a random audit. Well, I have an interesting revelation from Mr. Obama and the national media. We now have my personal IRS tax files in our possession. Do you know what they say on top? On page 1? Sensitive case. Really? What's sensitive about a random audit of a small businessman? Do you know the date sensitive case was written on my tax file? The same week that Lois Lerner testified in front of the United States Congress. The same week she was suspended from her job. The same week she took the fifth on the grounds it might incriminate her. So what exactly was sensitive case referring to? I'm a national political figure, conservative best-selling author, conservative syndicated columnist, a fixture in places like Fox News Channel, personalliberty.com right here, and conservative talk radio, and a nonstop critic of the president. Obviously, the IRS was referring to politically sensitive. There's no other context where sensitive applies to me. Politically sensitive. But I thought politics didn't enter into it. Why would the IRS know or care about my politics? Why is a citizen's tax file connected to his political views? Good questions, but we're only getting started with the criminal implications. Written into the margin of my IRS tax files are the words of my IRS auditor. He wrote in my file that he spent many hours on the internet researching the political views of Wayne Root. He wrote about my many media appearances, including Fox News. He put that down. He wrote all of this on my IRS file. Isn't that a crime? Isn't someone going to prison? It's called political targeting. No wonder he was able to recite chapter and verse about my political views in a 15-minute phone call to start my audit. How chilling is this revelation to the national media? Remind anyone of the Gestapo? In a free and fair society, IRS agents don't spend hours researching a taxpayer's political views, not unless they're looking to destroy the taxpayer based on orders from above. Why was this research project of my political views necessary if the IRS was conducting a normal random audit? It destroys their whole argument. There was no normal random audit. It was a political witch hunt. Crimes are committed, my civil rights were violated, and my audit began with the phone call that the top IRS spokesman and official says can never happen. Now, would that IRS official care to weigh in on an IRS agent calling a taxpayer to lecture him about his political views after spending hours researching his life on the internet? What's the matter? Cat got your tongue? Wait, it gets better. My IRS files state that a United States Senator from Oregon was involved in my tax audit. At the time, both senators from Oregon were Democrats. So now we can prove it was a political witch hunt directed or coordinated by high-level Democratic politicians. Why would a U.S. Senator be involved in a random taxpayer's IRS audit? Why would an Oregon U.S. Senator be involved in the audit of a Nevada small businessman? Could it have been Oregon Senator Ron Wyden? After all, he was at the time chairman of the Senate Finance Committee with oversight over the IRS. Let's connect the dots. Why would an Oregon U.S. Senator care about a Nevada taxpayer? Could someone in the White House have asked the chairman of the U.S. Senate Finance Committee with oversight over the IRS to call the IRS and initiate an IRS attack on Wayne Root? Was the goal to destroy a critic of Obama? Perhaps to bankrupt me with legal fees or taxes and penalties? Or maybe just to distract or intimidate me from my nonstop appearances criticizing Obama in the conservative media? Now, I've heard many defenders of Obama claim I wasn't important enough for this White House to commit crimes to silence me. Really? 6,000 interviews in the last 6 years? And if I wasn't important enough, why was a Democratic U.S. Senator involved in my IRS audit? Here's a really good question. Why would any senator from either party be involved in a random IRS audit of an individual taxpayer? Isn't that illegal? Shouldn't that senator go to prison? Didn't it violate my civil rights? It's certainly beyond the scope of the duties of a U.S. senator unless the Obama White House asked that senator to get involved. Now, I'm truly honored that my personal IRS audit was that important to a U.S. senator, but everyone involved should go to jail because criminal acts were committed. But wait, we're not done. On May 23rd, my case was officially closed. Recognize that date? May 23rd, 2013. The date that Lois Lerner was suspended and the day after she testified in front of Congress and refused to answer questions on the grounds it might incriminate her. Coincidence? Why was my case closed at all? The IRS auditor handling my case informed my tax attorney he was called by a top IRS official demanding the case be closed immediately. Why would a top IRS official get involved in my case? Who am I? Who asked him to make that call? Did he know the politically damaging details of this audit-marked, sensitive case? Why did it happen on the very day after Lois Lerner's testimony? Why was it so important to close my case that week? Why the sudden rush? Why would a top IRS official get involved in the first place? Why would he even know about a random audit of a Nevada small businessman? Or was he involved in a case marked sensitive? Why would a top IRS official know the details of my case? Why the need for top-level IRS officials to intercede on the same week Lois Lerner appeared before Congress? It's clear that I was targeted and persecuted by the IRS twice because of my conservative political views. There's no debate anymore. I'm living proof this was a widespread political witch hunt and criminal conspiracy within the IRS. But my case is also proof this scandal extended beyond the IRS to high-level Democrats who gave the order, including a specific Democrat U.S. senator. It's all in black and white in my personal IRS tax files. Facts. Now it's time for the mainstream media to do their job. Connect the dots just like you did with Watergate. Who asked the IRS to target Wayne Root? Who gave that lowly IRS agent the order to call Wayne Root on the phone when the IRS never calls anyone? Who asked that Oregon senator to get involved in my audit? Why was a top IRS official interceding to close the case? Why was it marked sensitive? The conspiracy goes directly to the Obama White House. I'm not just any conservative media personality. I'm Obama's Columbia College classmate, class of '83, who has repeatedly publicly questioned Obama's background and agenda in the national media, including right here, nonstop, at Personal Liberty. I'm one of Obama's loudest critics. It appears my criticism hit close to home, and I got under Obama's skin. And someone in Obama's White House either called that senator to try and destroy me, or perhaps they directly called the IRS and then called the Oregon senator to coordinate and oversee the attack. Two things are now crystal clear. First, I was the victim of a widespread, politically motivated criminal attack by the IRS. Second, I wasn't alone. I'm the tip of the iceberg. This didn't just happen to me, it happened to thousands of people. Critics of Obama, GOP donors, Tea Party groups, conservative media guests. They were all targeted by the IRS, and this is how Obama stole the 2012 election. He used the IRS like the Gestapo to intimidate and destroy people's lives. Richard Nixon didn't dare do 1/100th of this, and he was forced from office just ahead of an impeachment mob. I'm just the canary in the coal mine. I'm your wake-up call. If Obama did this to me, you could be next. Anyone could be next. We've got to stop Obama and stop the IRS today, because if we don't stop him, who knows where this leads? It's the IRS today, it's trumped up criminal charges and political prisoners tomorrow. My files have been turned over to the U.S. Senate. I stand ready to testify in front of the United States Senate committee investigating the IRS scandal. Game on. I'm Wayne Allen Root for Personal Liberty. See you next week. God bless America.